When I'm not writing, the thing I enjoy doing most is woodwork. I've got this little workshop here which is just about big enough to hold all the tools I use. But this is the sort of thing I like to make. Little things made out of wood in this way. And I make furniture and I make chairs and things like that. It's a pleasure to be working with this lovely material, this beautiful stuff, wood. And it's a pleasure to use nice tools, sharp chisels, good planes, saws, Japanese saws, those wonderful saws. The other nice thing about working in here and working with wood is that I can listen to the radio, I can listen to music. I can't listen to music if I'm writing, it's not possible. Besides, it's a beautiful material. It gives me an immense physical pleasure to touch it and to polish it and to shape it. It's just a delight. It's a privilege, actually. You know, this tree has spent 100, 150, 200 years growing. So I feel it's a privilege, an honour, if you like, to work with it. I'm very happy indeed to be speaking to my friends, my readers, booksellers and others in France. Being published in French has been a very happy experience for me because French is the only language I speak a very little bit of, apart from English. And it's always a pleasure to hear from French readers and to see my books so beautifully translated by Jean Hesch and published in this magnificent way by Gallimard, whom I'm very proud to be associated with, some most distinguished publishers. I'm very lucky to have been a teacher for 10 or 12 years. And when I was a teacher, I used to put on a play every year for the children of the school, but it wasn't just for the children because there are adults involved as well. There are the parents. There are the teachers who help you with the costumes and the music and the design. There are the dinner ladies who put out the tables for dinner, and they've got to get them away quickly so you can have the space to rehearse your play and all that sort of thing. So the audience I had for those early plays I was writing was both young and adult. And I wanted to entertain them all. I wanted to have funny things that they would all laugh at and serious things that would make them feel sad or excited or apprehensive. And I enjoyed that experience so much. And I'm extremely lucky to have discovered that the audiences for my books, my readers, are both young and older, adult. It's 22 years or something since the first book was published, since the first book of his Dark Materials was published in English. And the first children who read it are now parents themselves, and I hear from them quite often. The pleasure of writing for an audience like this, a mixed audience, is that the children force you to keep your mind on the story, and the adults don't allow you to be stupid. You've got to be, you've got to say interesting things and keep saying interesting things, but you've also got to keep the story moving. An interesting question, because it made me think about which comes first. Is it important to read his Dark Materials first? Or since the first book of the new trilogy, A Book of Dust, is set at a time before his Dark Materials, should we read that first? The answer is it doesn't matter. I expect quite a few of my readers for the new book will have read his Dark Materials, and so for them it'll be like revisiting a world that they know from a new angle, because the first book is set a little bit before the events in his Dark Materials. And when we come to the second book, in the series, it'll be set sometime after his Dark Materials. In English, I make a joke about this. If a book is set before another book, we call it a prequel. And if it's set after another book, we call it a sequel. So is this a prequel? Is it a sequel? No, it's an equal. That's my joke. So it doesn't matter. I would be glad if people read his Dark Materials. I would always be glad if anybody's read his Dark Materials. But if they want to read this first, that's equally fine. Titles are a difficult thing. Either a title comes straight away, even before the story, or it takes a long time to come, and it doesn't come at all, so you have to make something up. And of course titles are very different in English and in French. I had no idea I was writing a book called À la croisée des mondes. It came as a great surprise to me. The title of this first book, La Belle Sauvage. La Belle Sauvage is a name of a well-known inn in London, which is apparently named in the, what would have been 17th century, named after the Indian princess Pocahontas, who married an Englishman and came back to this country and died shortly afterwards of, I think, typhoid or something. But they were so impressed by her beauty and her gallantry, they said, that they wanted to name the inn after her, La Belle Sauvage. So that's what it was called. And the La Belle Sauvage in my story is the name of a little boat. Malcolm, my hero, has this boat, and he's very fond of the boat, and he rows it or paddles it all the way up and down the rivers and the canals in Oxford. He knows all the waterways in Oxford, which is laced through and through with canals, mill streams, rivers, and I thought that was a very good view. You could get a very good view from the level of the water of things that are going on around. And so La Belle Sauvage became the title of the book. The boat becomes almost a central character as the story continues. And it is La Belle Sauvage herself. I say she because she's a boat. And Malcolm and the baby Lyra and the character Alice, of whom I'm very fond, I like Alice a lot, become a little world themselves, threatened by nature, threatened by the human world, threatened by everything. But they managed to survive, thanks to... I'm telling the story, I'm telling you the end of the story. You have to cut that bit out. Well, I was very intrigued by the idea of dust, this thing that seems to be an emblem of our consciousness. And I wanted to explore it again. So that's what I wanted to do with this sequence of books. But at the same time, I was very keen to explore other aspects of the characters we know. I wanted to show people what happened when Lyra was a very young child, when she was a baby. How did she come to be in Jordan College in the company of these scholars and these elderly men? Why are they looking after her? What's she doing there? And I was also very keen to explore the nature of another character whom I grew to know. I've mentioned him before somewhere. He does exist in one of the other books, but I'm not going to tell anybody what that is. They can find it for themselves. But we meet him on the first page of the new book. He's called Malcolm. He's a boy of about 11, the age that Lyra was at the beginning of the first of his Dark Materials. And as I grew to, as I wrote about Malcolm, as I thought about him, as I pondered about his nature, I grew to like him very much. He is a clever boy, but a very ordinary boy. This is a point I wanted to make about Lyra as well. She's not a special child. She's not divinely gifted or anything like that. She's an ordinary child such as I used to teach, and so is Malcolm. But both Lyra and Malcolm have an unusual capacity, I think, for love and for affection. And I hope we see this, I hope readers will respond to this aspect of the story, because it was certainly the main impulse for me. Dust was always there, it was always an important thing, and I'll come back to it, and I really want to explore this nature of consciousness and what it is, and what makes us different from animals that seem to have a sort of consciousness, but haven't got an intelligence that can communicate with us, and what makes us different from things that don't seem to be alive at all. This is an extraordinary question, one of the basic questions of philosophy, and I'm very keen to explore that, which I will. But also, I wanted to explore the relationship between the child, the growing child, and the world around them, as it's mediated by love, by affection, by eventually by desire, by all the things that come under the heading of love. The hero of the new book, Malcolm, whom we meet on the first page, is the son of the innkeeper and his wife of a place called the Trout, which is a pub in the real world. In our Oxford, as real as that is, there is a pub called the Trout, and it's on the River Thames, and it's a very popular place. People come and go, and it's always full. And they have peacocks there, and there's across the river you can see the ruins of an old nunnery where the nuns of Godstow used to worship and do their work. I thought this was a wonderful place to put a child. It was an enormous pleasure to me to bring characters that we know from the other story, Lord Asriel and Mrs. Coulter, and Lyra herself, of course, into this new novel. We see them from a different angle. We see them at a different stage in their lives. We see them from a different point of view, because our main point of view in the novel, in this new novel, is the boy Malcolm. And when he sees someone, we see through his eyes, and we see what he thinks about them as well as what we already know about them, of course. So that was a great pleasure. And of course, it was a pleasure to discover some new characters. There's a man who turns up in the story. I won't say very much about him. He has a French name. He's Gérard Bonneville. Now, what part does he play in the story? That was very exciting for me to discover when he turned up. I don't plan these things. They just arrive. He was a great surprise to me when he turned up. So I was glad to say, welcome, Monsieur Bonneville, come in the story. The demon is the invention, I think, that most people remember and were affected by in his Dark Materials. And of course, the demon is a device that's very useful for the storyteller, because you can have a character saying one thing, but their demon doing something quite different that contradicts it. Or when the character is alone, instead of saying what they're thinking, you can have them actually talking to their demon and having a dialogue, a conversation, which is, again, much easier to write. As I discovered with the very first chapter of La Cause des Mondes, when the demon, Lyra's demon, appears in the first sentence. I'm still discovering things I can do with this idea of the demon. The best idea in the first book was the fact that demons change until roughly adolescence, the period of adolescence, when they settle down in one fixed form. That was a very easy way for me to signal the difference between childhood and adulthood, or in terms of the poet William Blake, innocence and experience. Well, that process is one that does feature in the new book, of course, but other things do as well. And it's an idea that I still haven't finished exploring, so there are more things to discover. The world that Malcolm is growing up in is, of course, the same world that we've met Lyra in already, a world which is marked by religious conflict, particularly a conflict between the authorities of the church, the magisterium, as I call it, and those individuals and societies and people who would rather be free of that sort of authority. That's a conflict that marks our own world very strongly at the present time. It's marked Europe in previous centuries. At the present day, it marks countries in the Middle East and the further east as well. The conflict between an authority that says, you shall do this because it is the will of God, and people who say, I can't perceive the will of God because I'm not sure there is a God, and therefore I'm going to do what I want to do. It's almost a basic human conflict. So naturally, it was going to occur in Malcolm's world as well. And the struggle, which of course I'm on very clearly on one side of it, and I hope my readers will sympathise with that. The struggle is constant and ongoing, and it will continue probably for as long as there are human beings. If we are adults with children, or adults who are somehow responsible for children, whether it's teachers or grandparents or uncles or aunts, whatever, we know children need certain things. They need food, of course. They need warmth. They need clothes. They need a place to live. They need comfort. They need companionship. They need the affection and guidance that parents can give them. They need all these. They need all these things, and we know that. If they don't have them, they starve. They're cold. They die. It's immediately visible that they're not getting the things they need. But there's one thing that people need, whose effects are not as evident, not as visible. Some of us, oddly enough, don't need this thing, but those of us who do need it like life itself. I'm talking about art. I'm talking about stories, poetry, music, paintings, or the whole drama, the whole world we call the arts. And if we don't give children these experiences, if we don't let them read, if we don't take them to picture galleries to look at paintings, if we don't give them music to listen to and music to play, the chance to play music and to make it, if we don't give them drama, they will starve. There's a big difference between writing and reading, of course, but it's a political difference with a small p. I think of it like this: when I'm writing a book, I am in complete control of everything. I am the boss. I decide if this character lives or dies. I decide if this is a sentence or I cross it out. I'm in charge of everything. Writing is totalitarian. I'm a dictator. It's a dictatorship. But once the book is finished, and my editor and I have talked about it, and I've made some changes and simplified this and cut that out and so on, and once the book is printed and published and sold in a bookshop, the process is entirely different. Because the reader takes a book and opens it up and reads, and the space between the book and the reader, I'm not there. I have no more authority. The book and the reader between them decide what it's about. The book and the reader between them negotiate a meaning. It's democratic. The process of reading is entirely democratic. I write as a dictator, as a totalitarian boss, but we read and it's a democracy. If you want to read this as a love story, that's fine. If you want to read it as an anti-Christian rant, that's fine. If you want to read it as a philosophical treatise, that's fine. If you just read it for the adventure, that's fine. You can read it in whatever way you choose, and you are right. You're correct. You're not wrong. Whatever way you choose to read it, that's fine. But I don't have any authority anymore. I'm going to read 2 or 3 pages from the novel now. This is a passage where we meet someone whom readers of his dark materials have met already. And we're with Malcolm, the boy of 11, in his father's pub, and there's a visitor, an important man. Malcolm goes to meet this important visitor, whose name is Asriel. Malcolm led him out of the terrace room and along the corridor and out onto the terrace before his father could see them leave. He closed the door very quietly behind them and found the garden brilliantly lit by the clearest full moon there'd been for months. It felt as if they were being lit by a floodlight. "Did you say there was someone pursuing you?" said Malcolm quietly. "Yes, there's someone watching the bridge. Is there any other way across the river?" "There's my canoe. It's down this way, sir. Let's get off the terrace before anyone sees us." Lord Asriel went beside him across the grass and into the lean-to shelter where the canoe was kept. "Ah, it's a proper canoe," said Lord Asriel, as if he'd been expecting a toy. Malcolm felt a little affronted on behalf of La Belle Sauvage and said nothing as he turned her over and let her slip quietly down the grass and onto the water. "First thing," he said, "is we'll go downstream shortly so no one can see us on the bridge."